is one of the biggest sections in the supplement area of most health food stores? Probiotics. There are all kinds of probiotics, all forms of probiotics, and it's an important part of a supplement regimen. Next up, we have Tina Anderson, who is the CEO of a probiotic company who has an amazing amount of knowledge and information in this important category of supplementation. We felt it was important that you learn about this. Enjoy this interview. Tina, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, I'm excited to be here.
Tell me a little bit about who you are and what it is you do.
Well, I am the CEO and co-founder of Just Thrive Probiotic. I came into this field based on a need, what we saw in the industry. My husband and I were actually in the pharmaceutical industry, and we saw the abuses and the overprescribing and just the push of pharmaceuticals. And we're seeing that it wasn't healing people. It was just treating chronic symptoms. And we wanted to get into a field that was focused on prevention and maintenance of health. And so we searched far and wide, and we were able to find the exclusive rights to these certain probiotic strains called bacillus strains.
There's a lot of talk right now where there's a shift from when I was a kid with the great miracle of antibiotics. Science was going to solve everything. Polio vaccine, antibiotics, putting a man on the moon. And then the slow realization that maybe we've overdone this. If you're in the pharmaceutical industry, how did you come to this epiphany?
Well, it was really the way we lived our lives with our family, with our kids. We just really decided that we didn't want our kids to be on antibiotics all the time. Inherently, we just knew that there were more natural. I've always been more of a natural person anyway, and we knew that there was something that we could focus on that was more in line with natural healing. And we knew that gut, we started to learn a lot about the gut and how important it was and how impactful it was on our overall health. And so that was really why we got to that point, because we didn't think that we saw like one relative go on, one prescription drug, and the next thing you know, they were on 16 different prescription drugs and they weren't really feeling better. So we were like, we need to do something that's really getting to the root of the problem.
And what made you think it was the microbiome?
Well, the Human Microbiome Project came out about 10 years ago and told us more about the gut than we ever knew before. And we just started researching and learning and surrounding ourselves with some really, really smart people who had studied the microbiome and found out that the microbiome was really dictating your health or your lack of health.
We've talked to several people in the series about probiotics, and I always get a little confused about what strains to take and do they survive the gut process. What have you done with this and what have you learned?
Well, that's one of the biggest myths out there about probiotics. Most of them don't survive. The majority of probiotics are made up of strains called lactobacillus and bifidobacter. So if you go to a health food store or grocery store or online and you find a probiotic, almost all of them are made up of lactobacillus or bifidobacter strains. And the product that we've launched does not have any of those strains, and that was done very intentionally because we know in general, they are very weak stomach survivors. They don't make it through the gastric system. So we know the gastric system the stomach is the gastric barrier, very acidic, very difficult to get through the gastric system and into the intestines alive. And so we actually were able to license exclusive strains from London University, but these strains are called Bacillus endospores. And these strains are actually able to naturally survive the gastric system. It's not because we did any enterocoding or special technology or anything like that. They naturally are organisms that have this shell around themselves, an endospore shell. Mm-hmm. So it's different from like a mushroom or a fungus type of a shell. It's an endospore shell that allows it to stay dormant until it gets to the intestines. So it's dormant in the capsule, it's dormant in the through the gastric system. It's not till it hits the intestines that it becomes alive and goes into this live vegetative cell state. Where most of the probiotics on the market, you see them in the refrigerator, which I always think is so funny because if a probiotic needs to be refrigerated to stay alive, it means it can't withstand the room temperature of the store shelf. So how is it going to survive 98.6 in your body? And the answer is it just doesn't. So the Bacillus endospore strains actually get to the intestines 100% alive. In fact, that's where they become alive. They recognize the intestines as their home, and that's when they become alive. And then they stay there for about 21 to 28 days, where they colonize and work their way all the way through the intestinal tract. They're 21 to 28 days they're there.
Are these the only strains that are in this form of endospores?
Yeah, the Just Thrive probiotic is the name of our product, and we only have Bacillus endospores in our formulation. So they are Bacillus coagulans, Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus indicus, and Bacillus clausi. Very, very specially formulated. We know that they work synergistically. They are found that way in the environment. So we already know. We're just going back to what nature, the way our ancestors used to get these strains. You know, our ancestors never got lactobacillus and bifidobacter from the environment. The only time you're really inoculated with lactobacillus and bifidobacter is through vaginal childbirth, breastfeeding, close skin to skin contact. But after that, our ancestors weren't getting, any lactobacillus or bifidobacter strains from the soil or from the environment. They were just getting the bacillus strain. So we're going back to nature. That's our approach, is to go back to nature, and as a result, we see how effective it is.
Where in nature would our ancestors have come across this?
In the soil. We would find them in the soil. So our ancestors used to eat roots and tubers. They ate off the land, and they weren't, cleaning off the dirt like we are now. And they were eating the dirt, which was really, really had a profound impact on their health. So it was just from the soil.
Dr. Zach Bush talks about how when we separate from Earth, we're really separating from the source, that when we get out in nature, and we smell the dirt or the canopy in the forest, or if we pull a weed, that we're breathing all this in, and this causes this sort of chemical reaction. It gives us a sense of well-being. We know that this makes us feel better, but it's not just the good feelings. There's a chemical reaction.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
So is this something that people need to take forever or intermittently? How is this used?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think everybody needs to understand. So people a lot of times come to us because they have an underlying condition. We see people who we have a double-blind human clinical trial on leaky gut, which we could discuss later. But a lot of people come to us because they're trying to fix something, and it works, and it's been amazing for people, and it's great. But people will always say, well, what about if I don't have any digestive issues? What about if I've fixed the issue? And what I think is really important to make clear is that, first of all, our ancestors used to get these on a daily basis, or on at least a regular basis. So they were meant to be consumed. These bacillus strains were meant to be consumed on a regular basis, on a daily basis. The other thing is, the world we live in today is wreaking havoc on our gut. I mean, we know from the antibiotics in our, just a single course of antibiotics will cause, a year, it'll cause disruption, at least to a year in our gut flora. Antibiotics in our food, glyphosates, GMOs, Roundup, all that stuff is just wreaking havoc on our gut on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Toxins, chemicals, stress. Nobody thinks about stress is really, whether it's physical stress or mental stress. So all these things, there's this daily battle going on in our gut between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. And so we absolutely should be taking these every single day, because we need to be, helping the good guys win that battle with the bad bacteria. And we know that all these other therapies that we're doing, all these other supplements we're taking, or the food we're eating, is going to work that much better if our gut is not inflamed. And we need to make sure we're taking care of our gut for that reason.
I don't want to get into any claims or ask an inappropriate question, but can you tell me anecdotally how people have responded to this?
And I agree, I don't want to get into any claims either, so I will be very careful in my claims. But we have seen, almost, in a couple weeks, less gas and bloating, more regularity, better energy for people. Skin issues have become resolved. I mean, people think of their gut health as like, oh, if you have gas or bloating, or you have, your constipation or diarrhea, one of those things, but yet they don't realize you have a skin rash that's starting in your gut. You are having a little bit of maybe brain fog, maybe you're feeling sad, you have a lot of nervous energy. All of those things are all related to your gut. 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. And people don't realize that. And we've seen people who have said, God, I just feel so much better. I have more energy. I'm sleeping better. I have, my bowel movements are much more regular. All of those, almost every type of health issue that you have it really stems in your gut. And that's what people are starting to realize, which is great. People are starting to realize that now.
So it was only about 30 years ago that researchers first discovered neurotransmitters in the kidneys. And then after they found them in the gut, and they said, what are these doing here? Why do we have these brain chemical receptors all over our gut? It was literally finding something that didn't belong there in that old model that they found out that this is the birthplace of serotonin, which is really crummy to go without.
It sure is, yeah. We see that all the time.
So when you're talking to people who have severe health problems, are they open to this fact, or is it just emerging?
Yeah, I think people are starting to get much more open to it. I mean, they're realizing that the allopathic path isn't necessarily creating results and the results that they want to see. So I think people are definitely, it's such an exciting time right now to see people being open to this. And I always try to tell people when they have an issue in their gut or, any type of health issue, we know it stems from their gut. And if you envision a garden and the garden's been stepped on and trampled on and there's weeds growing all over the place, these strains go into that garden, they make it there 100% alive, they get rid of the weeds in the garden, and then they have the ability to bring those plants that have been stepped on and trampled on back to life. And the majority of probiotics on the market would just throw the seeds into that garden. And what they do is they probably don't even get in there, but if they did get in there, they may plant a plant here and there, where we're the gardener of the gut. And we know these strains are going in and getting rid of the weeds and the pathogenic bacteria, and they're going in and helping your own bacteria that belongs to you come back to life. And we know now diversity is the key. Every expert, people may have different opinions about different types of health therapies, but everybody agrees with the fact that if you have a diverse microbiome, you have health. It equals health. And so we know that these strains are going in and making your microbiome diverse.
Is there anybody that shouldn't use these? Is anybody contraindicated for this?
There really isn't. We always tell people who are pregnant or nursing to consult with their doctor, but it's so important for pregnant moms to have a healthy microbiome, because that's when, remember I was talking about that, that's when a child is inoculated with all their bacteria. So we have no contraindications. I always say everyone who wakes up breathing needs to be taking this, because it is, people take a multivitamin because, they want to get all their nutrients, but we know that taking care of your microbiome is ground zero for health. And you want to take care of it with strains that are actually getting to the intestines alive. They're surviving and they're making a shift. They're creating a shift in the microbiome.
So I know that you're excited about this, but what's on the horizon for you guys? What's coming next, or is this where you're going to live and die?
No, it's not at all where we've lived and died. So we just launched a prebiotic. So that's really exciting. We took our time to launch a prebiotic because one of the problems with prebiotics is that they sometimes will feed the bad bacteria. They don't know how to distinguish between feeding the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. So we found certain oligosaccharides that only feed the good bacteria. So that's really exciting. We just launched that a couple weeks ago. And we have on our plate already a vitamin K27 product. So our philosophy is to bring products to the market that are missing in the market and needed in the market. Our vitamin K27 formulation is very, very unique. We know vitamin K27 is really important for heart health and bone health. It's the mechanism that removes calcium from the hearts and the artery where we don't want it and into the bone where we do want it. So it has magnesium and zinc in the formulation, which are the two main cofactors of it. So we know vitamin K2 is a huge issue. The deficiency of it is a huge issue. We don't get vitamin K2 in the Western diet at all. So most people are deficient in vitamin K2. So we have a very thought out formulation for both our K2 and our prebiotic. And we have a liquid formula. Our liquid formula will be the exact same formulation as our probiotic formula. It's just, it'll be an easier delivery system, but people should give the probiotic capsules. You could open them and mix them with food. You could bake with them we've tested them up to 455 degrees. So great for kids. I think they're sometimes more important for kids because You know, I didn't grow up with, you know, a food laden with glyphosates and GMOs and all that, and Roundup like our kids are. So their guts are so compromised. So really important to give them that daily gardener of the gut and have somebody in there getting rid of the weeds and bringing their good bacteria back to life. And then we're going to do a cooking companion. So we've got some fun products coming up ahead.
Well, I'm excited for your success and excited to see what you guys do in the future.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Probiotics and gut health, a very important category. Really, really glad we can share this with you. Thanks for watching.